How's it going, everybody? This is the Fans POV, where I talk about my two favorite sports, the UFC and the NBA. Now, right now I'm going to be talking about Jake Paul versus Tyron Woodley. And I get it, it's boxing, it's not UFC. However, being that Tyron Woodley is a former UFC champion and that Jake Paul has beef with another UFC fighter every other week, I figured it's appropriate to talk about it here. Now, I want to talk about a few things in this video, but the priority of this video is to debunk all these dumb theories that people are saying that it was staged, right? Look, I don't mind if you think it was staged. I don't mind if your first instincts was to try to, discredit Jake Paul. I get it. However, I'm going to present some facts to you. I'm going to show you why it wasn't staged. And if you walk away from this video still thinking that, then you're just an idiot and I can't help you. Now, the first thing I want to talk about is just the fact that what Jake Paul did is a very common move in boxing. He did a feint. Now, fighters don't always feint with their hands. They feint with their entire body, right? Just a twist of the leg, just a little shoulder fake, just a little head movement. That'll get the opponent thinking that they're going to do something that they're not. That's the whole point, right? Those little feints are what gets the knockout. That's what Jake Paul did. If you look at the instance right before the knockout, Jake Paul dipped his shoulder. It looked like a load up, and he was loading up, except it also looked like he was going to go for the body, right? He lowered his body. Jake Paul lowered himself, and it looked like he was going to strike to the body, which he had been doing the whole fight. So Tyron Woodley tried to, block the hit by sticking his arm out. That's why you see him stick his arm out. He has his stance. He sticks his arm out and goes low to protect his body. In that second that he puts his hand down, Jake Paul goes over and then just knocks him out, hitting him on the side of the head, as you saw. It's a very common thing that happens in sports. Now, I understand if maybe you're not educated in how boxing works. However, I'm here explaining it to you. And if you're still going to walk away and say that it was staged, that's your prerogative. I can't help you. The other thing is, you have to know the context of the fight, right? All the stuff that was happening to the buildup of it. So, number one, Tyron Woodley was not Jake Paul's original opponent. That was Johnny Fury. Johnny Fury opted out because I believe it was like an infection in his ribs or something like that. He was injured. He pulled out of the fight. Tyron Woodley saved Jake Paul. He saved Showtime. They were scrambling. They didn't have an opponent. It was 2 weeks out. He took the fight with 2 weeks notice. Do you really think that Tyron Woodley would take this fight in 2 weeks notice, do them the favor of giving them a good opponent, and then also agree to getting knocked out and getting brain damage just so that Jake Paul can get his glory? Does that make sense? Is that something that you think would actually happen? Tyron Woodley was doing them a favor. They would not ask Tyron Woodley to throw the fight in that manner. Even if, let's say, for example, hypothetically speaking, let's say they did throw the fight. You really think they would do that? You really think they would tell Tyron Woodley, hey, you're going to lower your shoulder and he's going to knock you out viciously? Come on. It's just dumb. And on top of that, I mean, there was a point in the fight where Tyron Woodley split Jake Paul's head open with an elbow. I don't know how you can call that staged, right? So my point is, none of this was staged. It's ridiculous to think that two grown men are going to go somewhere and practice and stage it and choreograph it. It's just dumb. So if you believe that, you're stupid. You don't understand the sport. And a lot of people who say this, they say this to try to diminish Jake Paul, but I don't think they realize that you're not really disrespecting Jake. Who you're really disrespecting is Tyron Woodley, who's a legend in the MMA world. You're disrespecting him, his integrity as a competitor, as an athlete, as a man. To think that he's willing to throw a fight for money in that way, in that fashion, to make a fool out of himself just for money, you're disrespecting his legacy and who he is as a person. So if you don't know boxing, that's fine. But also, don't put your input. If you don't understand boxing, don't speak of it as if you do. That's all I ask. Now, what does this show for Jake Paul? That's the next question I want answered. Look, Jake Paul is hard to tell with him because he hasn't faced a real boxer, right? Quote unquote real boxer. Someone who's been doing it for a long time. Someone who understands the sweet science of boxing. Because even Tyron Woodley, he wasn't known as a striker. He was primarily a wrestler in the MMA. Granted, he had good striking. He was a strong dude, and he definitely had knockout power, but that's not what he was known for. He's not one of those guys like Jorge Masvidal. He's not one of those guys like Dustin Poirier, like Conor McGregor, who are specifically known for striking, right? So it's kind of hard to tell with Jake Paul. However, there is something we can take away from this. There's two things, actually. Number one is that Jake Paul has power. He knocked out Tyron Woodley. Tyron Woodley has been in the cage with dogs. He's been in the cage with guys who are probably stronger than Jake Paul, right? Tougher, meaner than Jake Paul. And he's been able to withstand their hits with smaller gloves, mind you. And Jake Paul knocked him out cold. He didn't move. Like legit cold. It wasn't one of those little knockouts where the person's still kind of conscious, but they can't stabilize and get back on their feet. No, it was a cold knockout. He wasn't moving. He stopped breathing for a couple of seconds. I exaggerate, right? But that's how good the knockout was. So what it proves to me is that Jake Paul has dynamite in his hands. All right. We saw it with Ben Askren, we saw it with Nate Robinson, right? But those aren't really competitors that we can say, oh, that's a good win. With Tyron Woodley, we can say that. Tyron Woodley's a real dude. He's about the business. He's about that life. And he just got knocked out by Jake Paul. So at the very least, you have to admit that Jake Paul has power. He may not be a good boxer. We don't know about that yet. We don't know how skilled of a boxer Jake Paul is. But we do know that he can pack a punch based off last night. Now, the other thing we learned is that Jake Paul's pretty resilient, right? I mean, he did get a huge gash on his forehead. I mean, that thing was huge. They zoomed into it after the fight, and you could see it was deep in there. He fought through that. He fought through an illegal elbow with a gash on his forehead, blood coming down. He fought through it. And that's something that we should look at. That's something we should notice when talking about Jake Paul, because a lot of times we think of him as a YouTuber. We think of him as a Disney star. We don't really think of him as a true boxer, as a true fighter, but I think he just proved it. Through adversity, through blood covering his eyes, and a tough opponent in Tyron Woodley, he still pulled through. I'm not saying you have to respect him. I still don't respect him as a boxer or as a person. I'm not saying he's a good boxer. What I'm saying is he proved two things that good boxers have, which is power and resilience. I want you to listen to me, and I want you to listen to me good. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like, subscribe, maybe drop a comment. I might hit you back. As a matter of fact, I have two other YouTube channels that you might enjoy, and they're going to be linked in the description below. The first is called A Man's POV, where I talk about philosophical concepts and societal issues that we face every single day. The second YouTube channel is called An Idiot's POV, where I look at dumb little things on the internet that I find interesting and I react to them. So if you're interested in those, go watch them. I will be waiting for you with open arms and kisses. But if you don't like those kind of things, if you want to stay here for the sports talk, there will be more content coming soon. As always, have a great day and take care.